Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. Our host today is Sabine Vatel.
At one time or another, you may have looked into the mirror and determined to lose a couple of pounds or lift more weights at the gym. For millions of people, what may have begun as a healthy concern for their appearance and eating habits has turned into a deadly obsession. If you have experienced the sinking, helpless feeling of watching someone you care about struggle with an eating disorder or want to find help or for them or for yourself, definitely stay tuned. Welcome to Hope on Fire. I'm Sabine Vatel, your host for today's topic, Dying to be Perfect. Our goal today, honestly, is to help save a life. And to help me with a very difficult and complex subject of the eating disorder, I have with me my co-host Rick Mann, and I'm really glad that Rick is here. And typically, eating disorders are seen as a woman's disorder, but we're going to find out that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily have any personal experience with this, but maybe just a male perspective and ask some questions, based from that.
It's going to be very helpful to us and to our listeners. I'm very certain of that. So I'm glad you're here, Rick. And I'm also very glad to introduce one of our guests. First of all, Nicole Rucker. Welcome back, Nicole.
Hi.
And those of you listening to us may remember Nicole from a show we did previously on women and body image. And you may log on to hopeonfire.org and hear that program. But for those who didn't hear her or don't know her yet, Nicole's a trained counselor. She has worked on a college campus, has served as a seminar and classroom presenter, specializing on teens and young women's issues. And she'll definitely help elucidate this thing about eating disorder. So glad you're here, Nicole. Mm-hmm. And also with us, we have another special guest. It's Yvette Willis. And Yvette has a very varied background. I mean, she has 20 years in law enforcement. She's a mom. She has a master's in pastoral counseling. She's working on her doctorate, actually. She's also a speaker and presenter on family life and women's issues. And welcome, Yvette.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You know what? In reading, I tried to do as much reading as I could on this topic, and I realized how little I actually knew. And the American Psychiatric Association tells us that since 1970, the incidences of eating disorders has just skyrocketed. And like 20 years ago, a few clinicians had ever heard about eating disorders, and now you can kind of go at a checkout stand or at a gas pump, and a regular guy or girl has heard about anorexia or even bulimia. And Yvette, there's another reason why. I mean, you're familiar with the illness because you treat people. People come to you for that problem. But there's another reason as well, personal reason you might want to share with our listeners today.
A couple of weeks ago, my niece, my step-niece, she passed away from an eating disorder, and basically there are complications from the disorder that they usually pass away from, which would be cardiac or, renal failure and such like that. And she was in her mid-20s and had been battling it since she was a very young girl, approximately about the age of 10.
Yeah. And you spoke about your niece. Again, very sorry for your loss, obviously, for you and your family. And you've spoken about your niece, and tell us a little bit about her background, maybe.
She was a beautiful baby. Her and my daughter were close in age, and they were both beautiful children. And they were both, chunky little children. And, but they outgrow it, and it's the things sometimes that we say or things that have been said in school. My daughter ended up being a skater and went on to be in the ballet and was obviously just very good at the ballet. She's beautiful. And I don't know that necessarily that did it, but I don't, there's various reasons why it kicks in.
And we'll definitely look into that more and more. But the point is that it strikes just anyone. There's no particular... it strikes any nationalities and just across the board, right, Nicole?
Right.
Any background? Because I think typically what I've heard is that it's more of an illness that strikes, middle class, maybe Caucasians, but that's not so. Other cultures also are affected.
Other cultures inside of American culture are also being brought to the surface more and more as the years have gone by, since anorexia and bulimia, as well as binge eating disorder, have been developed or diagnosed. So, I mean, according to the literature, basically industrialized countries are the ones that we're seeing the biggest population of eating disorders in, but it is existent in other cultures as well.
Well, sure. Let me ask you this. I mean, this might be a dumb question, but I mean, does this problem of eating disorders affect both genders? I mean, I think a lot of people might think that this is just like a woman's problem.
Actually, it does affect both men and women. According to what I've seen personally, I'm sure what Yvette's seen, and according to the literature also, the majority of victims are women. Mm-hmm. Like
that's true.
Close to 90%, I think, are women. True. But the number is growing for men, especially in high schools and middle schools somewhat, because they're getting into sports that demand certain weight requirements.
Now, when you say certain weight requirements, does that mean that they're not eating enough, or they're eating too much? Are they trying to make a weight, by eating more or eating less? Or
it goes both ways. It goes both ways, depending on what weight category that you're trying to.
Right.
Wow.
To what the coaches
make.
are pushing.
Mm-hmm.
The coaches will sometimes push that in any sport, whether it's skating, ballet, athletics with the men. Mm-hmm. It gets pushed on
football.
them. Yeah.
And I want to back up a little bit in terms of, because there's some people who are listening who may feel, well, this is not this has nothing to do with me necessarily, and may not even realize that they are battling an eating disorder and being perhaps in complete denial. And I wanted to, and there's another reason why this is kind of personal for you, Yvette, as well too, because you have experienced yourself that illness.
Right, I was anorexic for many years, since I was a teen, and then we were speaking earlier about the pregnancies and such like that, how that just absolutely throws you over, the edge on occasion, thinking, look at this weight. But it's basically a survival mechanism as well. You look at it as though there's our culture and our society. If you look at the magazines and such, we don't really look at the idea that they're airbrushed. They're the women in them or the men in them are not just that perfect. And myself, being in law enforcement and stuff, I wanted to stay in a certain weight class, and then again comes back to the weight class and such, and then all of a sudden your world starts falling apart, but you become so used to it. I mean, you can sit there and go days and weeks without eating, even drinking.
Well, let's talk about it. This is really mind-boggling to me, because I really want to try to understand this. Even those who are listening, I'm sure, are trying to understand this. Let's talk a little bit about the definition of what it is exactly. We're focusing on two main ones, which is anorexia, which most of us have heard of anorexia through the news when it's affecting celebrities or something. Maybe Nicole, you can probably give us some sort of a definition. What is anorexia?
Okay, when we're looking at anorexia and bulimia, specifically those two of the eating disorders family, they share a lot of similar characteristics, and I mean, there's a component of weight concern. But the difference is going to be with anorexia, you're going to see almost abhorrence and terror regarding weight gain. And so they're going to be underweight. That's the goal, is to be underweight, not just even normal weight.
So there's a fear of being big or fat, and they just want to lose the weight at all by any cost necessary. Okay, and what would bulimia? What would be the difference then with bulimia?
Okay, when you're looking at bulimia, then they're not necessarily looking at being underweight. They do want to be thinner, but mostly, I mean, maybe slightly underweight, but that's not the main goal. The main goal is just to be acceptable and to be a normal weight. Okay.
All right.
And it's also control. It's a control issue.
It's a control issue.
That to them is I guess a distorted view of control, if you will, because even if they've lost the weight, there's still that fear. Right. Like you've said, there's still that fear of the loss of weight. And it's one thing that they are in control in, but it is a spiraling out of control.
Exactly. The goal doesn't, it leaves my ideal weight, and the goal itself becomes the losing the weight.
That's right.
I see. So it's an obsession of wanting to not gain weight. Okay. I'm struggling to understand. As you can see, I'm like,
with the anorexia, when you're looking at the bulimia, again, the goal doesn't necessarily mean they're going to keep reducing their weight and going under and under and under. It's bulimia, more so than anorexia in a way, has been coupled with very similar characteristics of an addiction.
Right.
Okay, and so
right.
that's what takes over. It's like a compulsion to eat, and then you can't stop, and then, there's
the compensatory part where
right.
they want to go and they have to release, and that release is a feeling of release in itself, or a feeling of freedom and again of control.
Right.
You know what struck me as some of the things that I read are sort of coming back to my mind is even though they don't want to eat and they're afraid to eat because they might gain weight and have a distorted view of themselves, all they think about is food. Food is constant, because anorexia, I love terminologies and definitions, because anorexia means no appetite, but that's not, it's a misnomer, isn't it?
Exactly,
because
it is.
That's all they think about. They're always hungry.
It's actually,
You'll starve yourself.
Yeah, they've actually found that the mental capacity and some of the behaviors are very similar to someone who is starving not by choice.
It's mental. It's definitely.
So they've somehow tricked their minds.
Well, physiologically, they're also in the same they're going through very similar things as a person that is starving as a result of malnutrition from maybe their environment or whatever, that they aren't choosing to prohibit themselves from eating.
Okay, because some people immediately their reaction would be, well, eat something. But we'll see later on in terms of how to really be helpful to someone who's plagued with that kind of illness. So it sounds really grim in terms of how come some people recover, just as yourself, Yvette, you're in recovery. What's the turning point of an illness like this?
Well, mine was
happens?
When I had been taken to the hospital. I was working and I had been taken to the hospital, and basically my kidneys were shutting down, and I was still in denial of anything. And it wasn't something I had done purposely. It wasn't like I thought, well, I'm going to not eat today. It was something like, I'm too busy, I'm going to do that. And we use so many, I can speak for myself, use so many facades. I'm fasting. My biblical, reasoning. I'm doing a cleanse, another reasoning, And then, of course, I just don't have time. And when you keep yourself busy, you're filling that void. A lot of compensatory stuff takes place, with an eating disorder like that and the starvation. And then eventually your body just gets to a point where it's, it goes past that point and is not hungry anymore.
Well, I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing because you talk about it as an addiction. I mean, is the turning point a lot like other addictions where you really have to hit rock bottom sometimes?
Yeah. And if you're fortunate enough, because you can die from this disorder, obviously, it will take your life, and it damages your internals lifelong, just not being in that hospital at that point in time with the kidney problems. I have kidney problems now because of it. And counseling, you have to talk with somebody. You cannot do it on plain willpower. Some people can. It's just like alcohol. Alcohol addiction's the same way. You use that to, cover whatever feelings or whatever has caused that issue, in your life. And, again, the eating is it's about the food or the restriction of food.
Yeah, and in the other half of our program, we're going to speak more about those warning signals and kind of what's behind this obsession and maybe some solutions on how to intervene. Welcome back, listeners, to Hope on Fire. And our topic today is dying to be perfect, as we explore the ravages of eating disorders and offer hope to people who either know someone with an eating disorder or if you are yourself battling this illness, this disorder. And I struggled with introducing it because I know it's about an obsession about food. It's an addiction. And again, I'm gaining a lot of knowledge from the panel today. We have with us Nicole Rucker, Yvette Willis, and of course my co-host Rick Mann. And eating. Help me out a little bit. What is it about? Is it about? You said something about control. Is it because some people may be wondering? Is it about the food? Is it about perfectionism or looking good, or is it more than that? It has to be.
Well, eating disorders do have an obsessive compulsive segment to them. You have to consider an eating disorder if the obsessiveness contains merely food-related issues.
Right.
If they are obsessive over other issues, that's another diagnosis, obsessive compulsive disorder, which commonly occurs with one of the eating disorders because they're not usually diagnosed by themselves. There's something else that is going along with them. If you have bulimia, it's also very common to have maybe an alcohol problem.
That's right.
Or maybe kleptomania or some issue that coincides with the eating disorder itself.
Yeah, a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what about triggers? I mean, because it sounds like
Yeah.
a lot could be. You could say this is more of an emotional type issue where maybe someone's depressed. We haven't talked about this much, but I mean, I've always thought that overeating or binge eating would be a problem too. So I mean, are there triggers in people's lives that sometimes will put them into this type of lifestyle or this type of condition, and they might not even realize it?
Yeah, compulsive overeaters are doing a lot of it are uncomfortable feelings, and some other stressors that kick in could be abuse of some sort that may have taken place in their life. It could have been sexual abuse, physical abuse,
A huge relationship
teasing.
trauma.
That's right, divorce.
Maybe a big move.
Right, and
Not to go to college.
Would it be anything that would trigger a need for that control in
Sure.
one's life?
Exactly.
and they
generally?
can't express it any other way. So what they're doing is they're expressing it the best way they can by utilizing them.
And I'm
Okay.
also saying along with the eating disorder, regardless of which area it's falling into, as bulimia, anorexia, or binge eating, that there's a deep sense of low self-esteem.
Very much so.
And maybe a loss of identity.
Right, because your self-esteem and your self-worth it almost ties into your body image, if you will. They
Very
utilize
closely.
it. They kind of use that as their body image, and it ties in with that in a different way. You know
Again,
what I'm saying?
I also read that it's more of a feeling kind of disease that they're using the body in order to express something they're not able to. Does that make
It's
sense?
communication.
Right.
And, I encourage our listeners, those who are hearing us today, to go into our website, Hope on Fire, www.hopeonfire.org. We have a bunch of resources, including some of the ones that you've given us, Yvette and Nicole, so they can look in there and find even more information on what we're talking about. And I can't help but address the idea of the cultural influences. There's something that really struck me, you said, Yvette, about your niece's dad, about Annie's dad.
Yeah, he had spoken at her funeral. He had spoke about how do you fight society? How do you beat society and culture? Because of the magazines, or because in everyone's eyes you need to be thin. It's almost an epidemic. In the 50s and 60s, your mannequin that held your clothing were a normal sized woman's size. 5'4" woman will be 135 pounds hypothetically. Now they're only about 112. 112, 115, and if you look at the mannequins in the stores, they're also slimmer. So it's so
inhuman.
Yeah, and as the ages have gone down, as the years have changed, things have gotten thinner. So in our young people, I mean, we got kids battling this at the ages of 8 to 10 years old now because of the way we are with look at some of these children who have the makeup and the bodies and stuff like that, and the shame that they feel, in a sense, if they don't fit the par of what, society says it is.
Well,
Especially I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So you're looking at, for instance, a 6th grade girl. Okay. She's becoming very aware of her body and how her body might be changing, more or less 6th grade, 5th to 7th, And so that's a big time for her to be accepted by other people.
Right.
And so if it's going to be part of her development to engage her body as an acceptable feature to other people, then she's going to be looking for role models for that.
That's right.
So we have culture. That's a very good point. So you have the cultural influences. Could it be genetic even? Because I had heard somewhere that it...
They are doing that. They've been discussing and have found that like identical twins genetically have had this disorder and have been
It's almost
dealing
like
with
you
it.
can be predisposed to say someone might be predisposed to alcoholism or any other kind of addictive behavior, right?
Exactly.
And it happens to be that one.
Right.
In the literature, it's showing that it's more likely to happen if you've got a parent that has the disorder for it to be passed on to their daughter. So you're going to see a first generation pass more so than like my aunt had it or my cousin or my grandmother.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this then. I mean, do guys, whether it's maybe a boyfriend or maybe even a father, I mean, is there any kind of thing that, we talked about cultural influences or genetic, but I mean, is there, so we can blame society, but yet, I mean, we have interactions with people. Do guys maybe indirectly or directly influence this at all? Or?
Yeah, I would say sometimes. I mean, I know that, our little girls when they're babies, oh, she's such a chunky little thing, and they do that, and they make. But I'm telling you, and then when they're starting to grow out into puberty and such, that they're reaching, then it's like, oh, you look so thin now. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, somebody noticed me, I'm thin.
That's my specialness.
Exactly. And then the men
reinforces that behavior.
And even in women, and it can be reversed to men as well by the comments that we make to one another. You got to watch what you say about someone's body appearance, especially if one's had a child.
Yes.
Or if you've put on weight, and you're in your 30s now and you're not in your 20s or your 40s or what have you. Sometimes our comments as jokes, can really do some damage. It can be really hurtful.
Right.
I know when I was working with some pregnant teens, that was when I saw the biggest manifestation of the eating disorder all at one time. They may have had the disorder before, but it was highlighted during their pregnancy because it was unwanted weight, and they couldn't do anything about it.
And they went to drastic measures to try to lose that weight. And
it can cause eating disorders, whether it's compulsive bulimia or anorexia, can cause infertility and problems with pregnancies, if you will. You won't be able to, it's very difficult for women and men.
And the symptoms of what happens to you, whether it be anorexia or bulimia physically, is just staggering and very scary. I mean, visually, if you see a picture of somebody who's suffering, it just makes it's just horrible looking. I mean, it's crazy.
You'll probably see it more drastically in anorexia than with bulimia.
That's right.
Because with bulimia, you're going to see usually a girl. You're going to see a girl that's usually more normal weight, maybe a little overweight, maybe a little underweight, but it won't be as obvious.
Drastic,
so if you want to help, because we're going to talk about prevention, but if you want to be helpful to someone, what are the warning signs that something is wrong? I mean, they might just be, I suppose with anorexia, if you see some bones sticking out,
some emaciation,
that's an indication that's a problem.
Yeah.
But it seems like you don't want it to go that far. So how would you pick up that there's a problem even in somebody?
We were talking about bulimia. You'll see puffy cheeks. It's because that's a result of the vomiting. The salivary glands are inflamed.
Right.
So they're going to have puffed up teeth like
dental
with mumps.
caries. Yeah, the dental caries on their teeth where the cavity, from the acid of the, also doing the same thing. Yeah,
so it's like
it's the
enamel off their teeth, or their teeth will be like it'll be jagged. Sorry. Those are some, or you'll from putting your fingers in your mouth, so you'll have on your fingers or on your hand, you'll have like maybe calluses or scarring.
A lot of other things that they'll do, anorexic or bulimics, with the pain that they're feeling. There's a lot of self-hurting. They will self-hurt, whether it's cutting, burning, or whatever. You need to look for those other scars on them as well, because they keep it, bulimics especially are quiet about it. It's not something they're doing openly. It's always secretively.
Is there shame associated as well, too?
Oh, sure there is.
That's you have to be secret. You have to do it in secret.
That's why it's hard for them to seek help, because of the shame and the guilt.
Yeah. With an anorexic, you can also see they're sitting at dinner and they have, their 3 peas.
That's right.
And, their quarter piece of bread, and so when you're seeing that, or maybe some it'll take them a long time to eat because maybe they'll cut their food up into tiny little
the obsessive
pieces.
Component again is there. So how do you how would you confront someone like this? Because it seems like you don't want to. Most people, I've been reading a little bit, are intimidated, and they don't want to really interfere. It's like it's their business, they're trying to lose weight, and they don't want to make a big thing out of it. So how would you even?
Sometimes you can keep it very secretive where people don't know. You can say, "Oh, I've already eaten."
Yeah. So how do you confront?
And then if there was someone, if it gets to a point where you know that their health is at risk, then I would think you'd need to be assertive. You need to
say,
sit down with them,
I'm concerned about you.
Not embarrassing or aggressively, but and saying, let's talk, or let's get something. Let's find out,
and maybe not even in like
about
a big group of exactly.
Don't bring up the food. It's about the food.
And what about hope for recovery? For those who are listening to us, I want to make sure that we end this on a tone of hope. Obviously, you're a living example of that, Yvette, that it's possible to survive this.
With early diagnosis, too. I believe with early diagnosis and then counseling. You've got to counsel.
And involving family so that the environment that the person is living in is going to have to change. So the family counseling along with individual therapy as well.
So it's not just the individual, but the whole family system.
Correct.
All right. You know, there's so much more we could say about this topic. Obviously, we want to encourage those who are listening to us to check out our website, www.hopeonfire.org, to learn more about this illness and how they can help themselves and help somebody they love. But I want to say thank you to you, Nicole, Yvette, and of course my wonderful co-host, Rick, for being here and helping us with this very complex subject. And, you know, our program just barely scratched the surface of the destructive nature of eating disorders. I encourage you who are listening to be informed. Again, check our website for more information. Food is often a symbol of salvation in the Bible. And there's a food that God offers. Jesus says that He is the bread of life. He wants to walk with you through the mountains and the valleys. My invitation to you is to receive Christ Himself. Hold on to His promise to make you whole. Amen. Thank you for joining us today, and see you next time. I Hope on Fire.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Once again, that's Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860, or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.